everyone, it's Aspen, your host for Forestry Talks, a podcast that explores all things forestry in Alberta. I'm really excited to be here on site at the Banff Fairmont Springs Hotel for our 82nd annual general meeting and conference. We've got a ton of great guests here. There's so much networking. We're having a great time, and I'm really looking forward to bringing some of those guests on this show for you to listen to. So stay tuned. We're going to have a great week. I can't wait to share it with you. Hey folks, we're back with another episode of Forestry Talks for our AGM series right here, filmed in the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel. I'm super excited to have Kathryn Wagner on the show with me today, the Executive Director of Inside Education. Kathryn, thank you for joining me.
Oh, hi Aspen. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you are a newer Executive Director for Inside Education, but you're not new to Inside Education itself. So tell me a little bit about that, your journey in Inside Education, and what the heck this program's all about.
Sure. So I'm actually a high school teacher by training, and I came to Inside Education way back in 2006. So I've been with the organization over 18 years now, and really got the chance to be on the ground, teaching, working with students, and being out in the field. And then through that journey, had an opportunity to work with our former executive director. And it was just back in May that, I was a successful candidate and the board elected me. So,
really excited for you, Kathryn. I don't think there's anybody better to fill the role. Of course, you've got a long time working in education with the program. And we have a pretty unique connection to Inside Education here at AFPA through our Work Wild program, which we've actually not yet talked about on the show, but we'll have to get to that at some point.
Okay. Yeah.
But we are partners with Inside Education in something called the Forestry Futures Alliance. So, yes. Kathryn, talk to me a little bit about why that partnership's important.
Yeah, so Inside Education, we do environment and natural resource education. So we do a lot of forest education. We also do some energy education, agriculture education. And what we noticed was in the forest education space, there are two other fabulous organizations, one of which through the AFPA Work Wild, focused on careers education. And then, of course, Careers the Next Generation, doing a lot of apprenticeship programs and working directly with high schools.
Yeah.
And so one day, probably over drinks, we sat down and said, how can we really elevate the work we're doing for the benefit of students and teachers, and each play a unique but collaborative role in bringing together the conversations about the forest sector to classrooms to really, really support teachers. So then, we each do our own programming, but through the Forest Futures Alliance, we're able to kind of work broadly across the sector, work with our industry partners, and kind of join together on some of the different projects. So we've had some several successful collaborative initiatives, including the Regenerate Summit. I believe you were there. Yes. So projects like that really take the voices of many and the efforts of us all. And so that's why I think the Forest Futures Alliance is a really important collaborative effort, and it's really unique. Again, I've been working in this environmental education space for 18, almost 20 years now. And there is no other model that has been truly collaborative like that. So I'm really, really proud to be part of the Forestry Futures Alliance.
Absolutely. And, I'm so glad you brought up the Regenerate Summit. I definitely want to get to that. But before we get there, I want to walk us backwards a little bit.
Sure.
And come back to environmental education, forestry education, really interesting kind of unique conversation. It's a unique way to connect with the schools. So what does that mean when we're talking about environmental education or forestry education, and what is Inside Education doing in the schools?
Sure. So for us, that kind of environmental or forestry or natural resource education really means providing young people experiences and opportunities and resources so they can see a future for themselves in the sector. And just being really informed and engaged stewards of that resource. So for us, it looks like running field trips for elementary and junior high students. We have 7 different demonstration forests across the province. We have about 10,000 kids a year that go through these demonstration forests, kind of outdoor learning opportunities. We get into the classroom. We also do a lot of teacher professional development. So it's about empowering teachers to connect with current forest operations, to connect with what's on the ground currently happening, and bridging that to what's happening in the curriculum, and how teachers can develop lessons and activities to really bring that conversation to life in the classroom, instead of it being just a pass by, a page in the textbook kind of thing. So it is about experiences and really, really supporting both the teacher and the learner, getting them outside, getting them involved.
Yeah. Well, it's so great because I was just in high level earlier this summer, and I was chatting with John Thurston and Gail Hayday from the Northern Lights Forest Education Society, and they were remarking on how, being outside, doesn't matter what you were doing, whether it was math or, anything, was always the best day in school. So thinking about these field tours that you get to do, the field schools with students, even teachers, like tell me about those, because I wish that I had an opportunity to do something like that when I was younger. And so that has to be the best day of the year.
Oh, absolutely. Who doesn't love a field trip day? So I think inside education, our field trips are really unique in that we use these demonstration forests. So it is about getting outside and exploring nature and understanding ecosystems, but we also get to see things like live harvest demonstrations, and we get to see active forest operations, and we get to understand forestry on operations on the ground. Often we have different industries or companies coming out and sharing their stories, sharing their work, doing tree planting demonstrations. So it is a really engaging field trip. And we have tons of feedback from the 10,000 students a year that come out that are like, oh man, I didn't know. We're using the tools, having that really hands-on experience that I cored a tree. I know what that means. Yeah. And I know how that can be applied. And yes, I counted the rings and my teacher made me do a math activity, but it was, super cool. And that will be a memorable kind of aha moment that they can carry with them for a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm glad you brought it back to kind of the teacher side of things, because the professional development tours that you do, I think, are also really unique. And there's so much value in that because, teachers, I empathize with them. They learn lots of things to teach when they're in school. But, sometimes when it comes to teaching about forestry and what happens in trees and forests, if you don't personally have a connection or a background in that, you're teaching maybe a little bit more theory than something that you understand. So talk to me about the teacher PD tours and what happens there and kind of what the uptake is from teachers.
Sure. So we
give you 100 questions.
Yeah. Okay. I got them all.
Yeah.
So we do lead several teacher professional development tours, programs throughout the year. And you can kind of think of these as extensive field trips for teachers. So my tagline for it is always step out of your classroom and into ours. And I'm using Alberta as our classroom and saying, okay, so I get about 30 or so teachers on the bus, and we spend 2, 3, up to 6 days really deep diving into some of these key topics. So we just did a forestry teacher professional development where we started in Edmonton. We took the bus, we went out to Hinton, we talked about some of the research happening out there. We toured one of the mills, and really then we created this community of educators that get it. And they're like, okay, I understand what's happening. And at Inside Education, then we facilitate the conversation of so what? What does this mean in the classroom? What kind of activities can we bring back to the learners? How, what resources are available? And so now we have this community of educators that feel confident. They have this experience that they can draw from their own picture to say, I took this picture when we were, touring or meeting with so-and-so, and I asked them the question. Student, I asked the question that you had directly to them. And it's really firsthand experience that will make the difference. And we do get a lot of uptake on our teacher professional development program, I think, or programs. I think teachers are often looked to as like, oh, you're the teacher, you're the expert.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm not the expert. I don't know. I got to go check it out. So there is this interest and enthusiasm to learn and to share, and they just want to be able to bring that back. And I would say, just adding to that, a lot of teachers come to Alberta. They're not from Alberta.
Yeah.
And obviously there's many that are, but those that aren't, like the industry or the landscape may be very different where they're from. So having that really firsthand experience is critical if we're going to, really have good education in the classroom.
Yeah, well, and in even like a more local context, it's interesting because I didn't think we were going to get this political, not to scare you, but it's like, we talk about in the sector all the time the rural and urban divide and some of the challenges that we experience as a sector because, a lot of rural communities, the backyard is their forest. They're very familiar with the forestry sector. There's, I think something like upwards of 70 communities in the province that are forestry dependent. So, you go into those schools, you talk to those students, a lot of them, like they're aunties, uncles, parents, they have some connection to the sector. But in urban environments, it's a little bit different.
Yes.
And so the PD tours that you're doing are like also a great way to facilitate that understanding 100%. In those other environments. Yeah,
100%. We do get a lot of interest. And, it always... somebody who's born and raised, but they've been like, I've never been, north of Edmonton or Calgary. I've never seen that. I've never been to the foothills and seen the eastern slopes. And so it's just that opportunity too, to get out and see parts of Alberta that they've never seen. So I think that is a draw too, and then really provides that education foundation for the classroom.
Yeah. And what are you hearing from teachers after the PD tours in terms of how they're incorporating what they've learned into the classroom?
So we do track that quite closely because I want to make sure what we're doing has an impact. So I think the number one thing that we're seeing is that they are confident and willing to talk about it in the classroom. Because if they don't have that experience, and they're like, well, I don't know, I'm not going to, say things that I don't know, so that they feel well equipped to bring the conversation up in the classroom. They feel supported in bringing that conversation to the classroom. They have the networks, the resources. So to me, it is about that confidence. And then like more long term, they can then integrate that into their annual lesson planning. And then there'll often always be the field trip out to the, forest, and the teacher can then lead parts of that. Or they have, a new school project that they're going to work on and really engage their students in a deep dive themselves. So I think, there's lots of outcomes that way.
Yeah, no, and that's so great. Your focus, if I'm not mistaken, for youth is typically is it kindergarten to grade 6 or grade 5, K to 5?
No, we work, I would say we work K to 12.
Oh, K to 12.
Yeah. We don't do a ton with the early learners. We do have some resources for the kind of K to 3 teachers of get outside and explore the forest kind of resources. But we work a lot grade 4, I'll say up to grade 11, 12. And our youth summits are our high school focus. So when we're in the classroom, it's mainly elementary, junior high. Okay.
My goodness. Well, that's really good to know. But anyways, one of the reasons that I bring that up is because of the programs within the Forestry Futures Alliance. I would argue that Inside Education might be one of the most impacted by the recent curriculum changes to the K to 6 curriculum. So wondering if you can talk a little bit about what we saw change significantly as it specifically relates to your work. I'm not expecting you to identify all of the different ways the curriculum was changed, but what were the big changes for you at Inside Education that you saw, and how have you adapted?
Yeah. Great question. You said we weren't going to get political.
I know.
The curriculum is one of those things. We were watching kind of the development of the new Alberta Program of Studies, the curriculum, for a long time. It's been something that we've talked about, not only in kind of the nonprofit sector, but that the government has been talking about for a while, is making these changes. So we've been paying really close attention. And there's been major changes to both the social and science curriculum, where we pulled a lot of our content from. So initially we were like, how does this how does this fit? Like there were impactful things, like they took out the trees and forest unit in grade 6. So there used to be a unit just for every grade 6 would kind of have to learn about Alberta's forests and trees. But what I've found, so this is the very first year the new curriculum is fully implemented. And so we spent a lot of time building new activities, really workshopping with teachers about what that meant for them. And what I've noticed is it's actually provided more opportunities to really expand the conversation about forests. And so we can talk about forests from the lens of wildfire management, or from the lens of water, from the lens of, species at risk. And we can bring in all these really dynamic conversations. And the curriculum's a little bit more open to doing that instead. So it has provided opportunity for sure.
Well, and I mean, in fairness, probably forced us all to be a little bit more creative about how we're trying to bring forestry education to the classroom. Because I know there were definitely some, for our program, which of course connects with grade 6 students a lot and grade 6 teachers, we had a lot of teachers the last year of the last curriculum being like, oh, it's our last time teaching trees and forests, please come out. Because, we want to have that opportunity. But I think it's so inventive and awesome, the different ways that your team has been able to continue to engage on that conversation.
Yeah, it's been great. And the more opportunities we can find, like now we can talk to grade 4s about trees and forests. We can talk to grade 5s about trees and forests, and grade 6s about, so they get kind of that scaffolding or building throughout the curriculum instead of it being a one-off unit in grade 6. So although it was scary, we got through it, and I think we'll all come out in the end better for it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's so great to hear, Kathryn. I'm always so excited about forestry education, and it's so I've had the opportunity myself to go into the classroom a few times and to connect with teachers and students, and they just have some of the most entertaining questions and responses. So I'm wondering maybe if you could share some memorable classroom moments.
Classroom moment. I'm going to flip your question. I'm going to share a field moment, but beautiful. It's like my very favorite student story. So I was out and we were doing tree measurements, and what we do, we use the increment board and we core a tree so we can talk about tree age and how, a timber cruiser would go out and measure the forest. And I had this student who was like just looking beside me and goes, "Whoa, this is like TV in real life." Oh my God. And I was coring this student. I was like, this is real life. But I think it is these opportunities to show them things, to have these conversations that they haven't had before. And they're just like, wow. Yeah.
Well, and I think I find students have some of the most fascinating questions. And so starting in some of the younger age groups, I remember I was presenting about mountain pine beetle, and there was a student that was like, do spiders eat the mountain pine beetles? And I was like, I have never in my entire professional career wondered that. Nobody's ever spoke about it. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to have to get back to you after I talk to somebody much smarter than me on the subject matter. And now, of course, I'm struggling to remember. I'm fairly certain that they do, but somebody's gonna have to fact check that.
They probably could.
I mean, that seems reasonable to me. But anyway, so at your Regenerate Summit, which let's chat a little bit more about that one. But one of the things that I was most impressed about was the engagement from the students and the really insightful questions that they were asking. So maybe, Kathryn, if you could tell me a little bit about what the Regenerate Summit was, and then, some of the connection with students.
Yeah. Okay. So the Regenerate Summit is a really unique kind of provincial scale project where we get high schools from across Alberta to kind of nominate a forest leadership team. So you can kind of think like the volleyball team, but cooler. They're the forest leadership team. And they apply to attend as this team of students and teachers to attend the event. And the applications happen, and then in January they're selected. The event happened in March of 2024, and we had 20 high schools, including 4 Indigenous communities, which was fantastic. We had rural, urban, kind of that full breadth of participation. And we spent 4 days with these high school leadership teams talking about, every topic you can think of when it comes to the forest sector. So we had over 55 expert guests join the program. Then we also did some workshops. We had them out, pretending to be wildfire fighters and using the little I can't remember what they're called, the little packs to put out fires. Tour some of the mountain pine beetle plots, so really get out on the land. So doing all these expert speakers, workshops. We had a careers panel and, just inspiring that connection to next steps. And then the outcome of the summit is that each high school leadership team puts together a school project. And that school project is student-devised, student-led, but is meant to go back into the community and say, here's what I learned, here's why it's cool, here's how we can be involved. And so, we had some awesome things come out of that, like a student-led career fair. Or the high school students going and teaching the younger students in their community about what they learned about forests and forestry. It was just a really fantastic event that as a teacher, to me, was how education needs to happen at the high school level of really bringing that student voice as an equal kind of voice we had industry professionals, government, NGOs, Indigenous communities join, and the students at the table were the voice. So it was great.
Well, I mean, it was a really powerful event to be a part of. So I joined for one of the workshops. We were talking about kind of how to communicate about forests, really, is what it was. And so we actually did talk about podcasting, which is, hilarious. It feels like a very meta moment to me, bringing that up. But we talked about podcasting. We talked about, best practices when it comes to communicating about forests. And I so loved that model, Kathryn, because it was, back to that whole conversation of, and then what, right?
Yes.
Like, it wasn't just bringing together these students to, run our mouths about forestry and trees and all this kind of stuff, but like, really engaging them and then creating kind of an expectation that there was going to be like a product or like something coming out of it. And the students were so energized about that.
Yeah. I would also say that it was equally important for all of those experts that had the opportunity to join and interact with students. They got to see how passionate and engaged the students are and the level of questioning. Like, I had so many experts come up to me after, like, wow, I can't believe that a student asked me that question. Like, I get that question from, our community members or our political leaders, and the students are thinking about the same thing. So I think it's, to underscore that young people care, they want to be involved, and we need to find a whole bunch of opportunities to get them, into these conversations and get them involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I can't wait for the next one, Kathryn.
Oh, it's coming. We're starting to dream. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I mean, I want to maybe give a moment for some of the other programs, because I want teachers to be excited to get involved with Inside Education. And I know you put on other summits as well. And hopefully everybody that's listening is eagerly awaiting the next Forestry Summit.
Yes.
But if you are a teacher, if you know a teacher, and you want to, get connected with Inside Education and some of the summits, how can someone do that?
I would say the very best place to do that is tell your friends, families, any teacher you know, go to www.insideeducation.ca, and all of our programs, our classroom, our field, our teacher professional development. There's even some grant programs. So you can check all of that out on the website.
Awesome. So, Kathryn, one of the kind of key parts of the Forestry Futures Alliance is that we are funded, we are supported by the forestry sector. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the forest industry shows up to support Inside Education and what that looks like.
Yeah, the forestry sector has just been a phenomenal supporter. I mean, Inside Education, we are about to celebrate our 40th birthday.
Woohoo!
Yes. And actually our roots, pun intended, are in forest education. So they showed up back in the 80s going, okay, forest education is important. And having those voices at the table from day one has been amazing for Inside Education. So yes, they've showed up with funding, which has been really, as a nonprofit charity, really important. But more than that, if we ask for a tour or a speaker or, somebody to talk about a certain topic or issue or just advice on advisory committees, that kind of thing, they've just been so supportive. And just hands down, thank you to all the folks that throughout the years from day one and now up to year 40, have just been so supportive.
Yeah. And you know what? It is eye-opening in the classroom to have forestry professionals join you, whether it's,
Yes.
in the field or in the class itself, because there is a difference between, me, Aspen, the forestry communicator, talking about somebody else's job versus having a real life tree planter or, a real life forester or engineer or somebody join you in the class to talk about what their day-to-day life actually looks like.
Yeah, 100%. Students want to be able to see themselves and see a role. So if they can, hear from somebody, they're like, oh, yeah, I could do that. I see what their career path was. I see how they're doing it, and that could be me.
Yeah.
And so you need those voices, and there's so many champions within forestry that are doing that. So
absolutely. Awesome. I'm so glad to hear that, Kathryn. My very last question for you.
Okay.
What does the future of Inside Education look like?
Ooh, I think, is this a job interview? They asked me that for my executive director.
Yeah.
No, so I am so excited. I mentioned earlier that we're celebrating 40 years. I'm so excited for the next 40 and the 40 beyond that, because to me, environmental natural resources and forestry education, the need for that is ongoing. Our demand is increasing, and there's more excitement and enthusiasm. So I think, you'll continue to see amazing programs like the Regenerate Summit, and we're going to get really creative. Who knows what future curriculum might bring, but we will be there ready to support teachers and inspire students, whatever that looks like. And just really, really excited. I think there's a lot of room for growth, and with we get more and more polarized in these places. And so having real conversations that bring in multiple perspectives and have informed discussions and, critical thinking is a big part of what we do. And so it's vital to both education, to the future of our forests, and to the future of our landscape to continue to educate. So I'm excited.
Awesome. Right on. Well, Kathryn, this has been amazing. Any final thoughts about forestry education you want to share?
No, again, just thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation as well. And I'm just really thrilled to be a part of the Forestry Futures Alliance with the Work Wild program and Careers the Next Generation. And I think there's, so much enthusiasm about environmental and natural resources education. And I'm just, check out Inside Education, and we're excited to keep going.
Right on. Awesome. Kathryn, thank you so much.
You're welcome so much.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of Forestry Talks, a podcast that explores all things forestry in Alberta. If you're curious to learn more, check out our website, albertaforestproducts.ca or loveabforest.ca. I'm your host, Aspen Dudzic, and I'll see you next time.
This series is proudly produced by the team at Road 55. Road 55 creates content that connects. For more information, visit our website at road55.ca.